In the shadows of Buckingham Palace, where secrets are currency and silence is survival, Captain James Mitchell had served the crown for 15 years without question. He had faced armed intruders, political scandals, and diplomatic crises with unwavering composure. But nothing in his distinguished career had prepared him for the moment when 8-year-old Princess Charlotte would pull him aside in the palace gardens, her innocent blue eyes filled with tears, and whisper words that would shatter his world forever. What she revealed would not only challenge everything he believed about protecting the royal family, but would force him to choose between his sworn oath of loyalty and his moral duty to protect an innocent child. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep, and some truths are too powerful to ignore. The princess's revelation would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of the British monarchy, expose corruption at the highest levels, and prove that sometimes the greatest threats to the crown come from within its own walls. Captain James Mitchell adjusted his earpiece and scanned the manicured gardens of Buckingham Palace with practiced eyes. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pristine lawns where Princess Charlotte played with her collection of toy horses, her laughter echoing through the carefully maintained hedgerows. At 8 years old, she possessed the natural grace expected of a royal child, yet there was something in her demeanor lately that troubled the veteran security officer. Mitchell had been assigned to the Cambridge Family's Protection Detail 3 years ago after serving in various capacities throughout the Palace Security Division. His military background in the Special Air Service had prepared him for most threats, but dealing with the subtle complexities of royal family dynamics required a different kind of vigilance. He prided himself on reading people, understanding their moods, and motivations before problems arose. The princess had been quieter than usual over the past few weeks. Her usual animated chatter during their walks had diminished to polite responses, and her bright smile seemed forced rather than genuine. Mitchell had mentioned his observations to his supervisor, Chief Inspector Harrison, but had been told that children go through phases and not to read too much into it. Today, however, something felt different. Charlotte kept glancing toward the palace windows, particularly those overlooking her father's private study. Her play seemed distracted, and she kept dropping her toys, her small hands trembling slightly. Mitchell maintained his professional distance while keeping her in his peripheral vision, ready to respond to any threat from outside the palace walls. The ground was secure, as always. The perimeter was monitored by multiple layers of security, from the armed officers at the gates to the plainclothes agents positioned throughout the public areas. Electronic surveillance systems tracked every movement, and communication with the central command post was constant. Yet Mitchell felt an unease that had nothing to do with external threats. Charlotte suddenly stood up from where she had been arranging her toy horses in a circle and walked directly toward Mitchell. This was unusual behavior for her, as she had been taught from an early age to maintain appropriate distances from security personnel unless there was an emergency. Her approach was hesitant, her eyes darting around as if checking to see who might be watching. "Captain Mitchell," she said quietly, using the formal address she had been taught. Her voice was barely above a whisper, and she kept her head down, focusing on her small hands clasped in front of her dress. "Yes, Your Royal Highness," Mitchell replied, maintaining protocol while lowering himself slightly to be at her eye level. Something about her posture and tone immediately put him on high alert, though he kept his expression calm and reassuring. Charlotte looked around once more before stepping closer. "Can I tell you something? Something important?" Her blue eyes, so much like her father's, were filled with an emotion that Mitchell recognized from his years of service: fear. "Of course, Princess. You can tell me anything." Mitchell's training kicked in automatically. When a principal, especially a child, indicated they needed to share sensitive information, it was his duty to listen and assess the situation appropriately. The little girl took a deep breath, her small chest rising and falling with obvious effort to steady herself. "Promise you won't tell Papa right away? I need to think about it more first." This request immediately concerned Mitchell. Protocol dictated that any information affecting the safety or well-being of the royal family should be reported immediately through proper channels. However, the child's obvious distress and her specific request suggested this was a delicate situation that required careful handling. "I promise I'll listen to everything you have to say first," Mitchell replied carefully, neither agreeing to withhold information nor refusing to hear her out. "What's troubling you, princess?" Charlotte's eyes filled with tears that she quickly tried to wipe away with the back of her hand. "It's Uncle Andrew," she whispered, the name barely audible even in the quiet garden setting. Mitchell felt his blood pressure spike immediately. Prince Andrew had been a controversial figure for years, with various scandals touching the edges of his public persona. The mention of his name in this context, combined with the child's obvious fear and distress, set off every alarm bell in the security officer's mind. "What about Uncle Andrew, princess?" Mitchell kept his voice steady and encouraging, though internally he was already running through protocols for handling sensitive information involving members of the royal family. "He comes to visit when Papa and Mama are away," Charlotte continued, her voice shaking slightly. "He says it's to spend time with George and me, but then he sends George away to play somewhere else. He says he wants to have special time just with me." Mitchell's professional composure wavered for just a moment as the implications of the child's words began to register. He had investigated enough cases during his military service to recognize the warning signs of inappropriate adult behavior toward children. The pattern Charlotte was describing, isolating her from other family members, claiming special relationships, occurring when parents were absent, matched textbook grooming behavior. "What happens during this special time, princess?" Mitchell asked gently, though every instinct screamed at him to immediately remove the child from any potential danger and report this conversation to the highest levels of palace security. Charlotte began to cry more openly now, though she tried to muffle her sobs with her small hands. "He makes me sit on his lap, and he touches me in places that feel wrong. He says it's normal because uncles and nieces are supposed to love each other specially. But it doesn't feel like love, Captain Mitchell. It feels scary, and it hurts sometimes." The words hit Mitchell like physical blows. His 15 years of military and security service had exposed him to many disturbing situations, but hearing these words from an 8-year-old member of the royal family created a unique combination of professional crisis and personal outrage that he had never experienced before. "He says if I tell anyone, especially Papa, that terrible things will happen to our family," Charlotte continued through her tears. "He says Papa might lose his job as a prince, and that people would blame me for ruining everything. He says no one would believe me anyway because I'm just a little girl and he's an important prince." Mitchell's training warred with his human instincts. Protocol demanded immediate reporting through official channels, but his experience told him that mishandling this situation could cause additional trauma to the child and potentially compromise any investigation that might follow. The political implications were staggering. Accusations against a senior member of the royal family would create a crisis that could shake the monarchy to its core. "Princess Charlotte," Mitchell said carefully, "you did exactly the right thing by telling me. What Uncle Andrew is doing is wrong, and it's not your fault in any way. You're very brave for speaking up." The child looked up at him with hope mixed with fear. "But what if he's right? What if telling makes everything worse for Papa and our family?" Mitchell felt his heart break for the little girl who was carrying such a terrible burden. At 8 years old, she should be worried about homework and playground games, not protecting her family from scandal while enduring abuse from a trusted relative. "Listen to me very carefully, princess," Mitchell said, his voice firm but gentle. "Adults who hurt children always try to make the children think it's their fault or that telling will cause problems. But that's never true. The only person who would be in trouble is the adult who did wrong things. Your Papa loves you more than anything in the world, and he would want to know if someone was hurting you." Charlotte nodded slowly, though Mitchell could see the conflict in her young face. Years of being told that family loyalty and discretion were paramount values had created a terrible dilemma for her. She had been raised to believe that protecting the family's reputation was one of her most important duties, yet she was also beginning to understand that what was happening to her was wrong. "What happens now?" she asked in a small voice. Mitchell looked toward the palace, where he could see other security personnel going about their regular duties, completely unaware of the bombshell that had just been dropped in the peaceful garden setting. His mind raced through the implications and the necessary next steps. "Now we make sure you're safe," he said firmly. "And we make sure this never happens to you again. But I'm going to need your help to do that properly." As they talked, Mitchell began mentally composing the most difficult report of his career. He would need to notify Chief Inspector Harrison immediately, but he also knew that this information would quickly reach the highest levels of palace administration and potentially the royal family itself. The investigation that would follow would be unlike anything the palace had ever handled internally. The afternoon sun continued to shine on the peaceful gardens, but for Captain James Mitchell and Princess Charlotte, everything had changed in those few whispered words. The next few hours would set in motion events that would test every system and protocol designed to protect both the royal family and the institution of the monarchy itself. Charlotte picked up one of her toy horses and held it close to her chest. "Will you stay close to me, Captain Mitchell? I'm scared Uncle Andrew might be angry if he finds out I told someone." "I'll make sure you're protected, Princess. That's a promise." Mitchell's words carried the weight of his oath to serve the crown, but now that service had taken on a meaning he had never anticipated when he first put on the uniform of a royal protection officer. The conversation in the garden was over, but the real crisis was just beginning. The walk back to the palace felt like the longest 100 yards of Mitchell's career. Princess Charlotte held his hand, something she had never done before, her small fingers gripping tightly as if afraid he might disappear. Her revelation echoed in his mind with each step, the weight of her words creating a crisis that went far beyond normal security protocols. Once Charlotte was safely delivered to her nanny for her afternoon lessons, Mitchell made his way to the secure communications room in the palace's basement level. The sterile, windowless space housed the most sensitive communication equipment, where classified information could be transmitted without risk of interception. His hands shook slightly as he activated the encryption protocols and established a priority connection to Chief Inspector Harrison. "Harrison here," came the gruff voice through the secure line. "Sir, this is Captain Mitchell. I need to request an immediate private meeting regarding a critical situation involving Princess Charlotte." Mitchell kept his voice steady, though the gravity of the situation was evident in his tone. There was a pause on the line. In 15 years of service, Mitchell had never requested an emergency meeting regarding the children in the Cambridge family. "How critical are we talking about, Mitchell?" "Category Alpha, sir. Potential harm to a principal. I can't discuss details over any communication channel, regardless of encryption level." Category Alpha was the highest classification for threats within the Royal Protection Service, reserved for situations involving immediate danger to members of the royal family. Harrison's tone immediately shifted to full alertness. "My office in 10 minutes. Clear your schedule and activate replacement coverage for your post." The line went dead, and Mitchell felt the full weight of what he was about to set in motion. Once he briefed Harrison, there would be no going back. The palace machinery would begin turning, and the consequences would ripple outward in ways he couldn't fully predict. Harrison's office was located in the administrative wing of the palace, a functional space with reinforced walls and advanced security measures. The chief inspector was a 25-year veteran of royal protection, having worked his way up from beat constable to his current position overseeing the entire security apparatus for the immediate royal family. His weathered face and gray hair spoke to decades of handling sensitive situations, but nothing in his expression suggested he was prepared for what Mitchell was about to tell him. "Sit down, Mitchell," Harrison said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. He activated a signal jamming device that would prevent any electronic surveillance of their conversation. "What's the situation with Princess Charlotte?" Mitchell took a deep breath and began recounting the conversation in the garden, word for word. He had been trained in detailed recall for investigative purposes, and he presented the information with clinical precision while watching Harrison's face grow increasingly grave. "Jesus Christ," Harrison muttered when Mitchell finished his account. The chief inspector rarely used profanity, which underscored the severity of his reaction. "You're absolutely certain about what she said? No possibility of misunderstanding or childish imagination?" "No, sir. The details she provided, the emotional responses, the specific behavioral patterns she described, it all matches established indicators of child sexual abuse. Her knowledge of these situations is not something an 8-year-old would possess through normal childhood experiences." Harrison stood up and began pacing behind his desk, his mind clearly racing through the implications and necessary protocols. This is potentially the most serious crisis the royal family has faced in decades. Accusations against Prince Andrew would create a media firestorm unlike anything we've dealt with before. "With respect, sir, the media implications are secondary to the child's safety and well-being," Mitchell replied firmly. "Princess Charlotte is currently at risk, and Prince Andrew has access to her whenever he chooses to visit." "Of course, you're absolutely right," Harrison said quickly. "Child protection is our primary concern. But we need to handle this with extreme care to ensure we don't compromise any potential investigation or cause additional trauma to Princess Charlotte." Harrison activated his secure computer terminal and began reviewing protocols for handling allegations involving senior members of the royal family. The procedures were complex and involved multiple government agencies, given the constitutional implications of criminal allegations against individuals so close to the line of succession. "First priority is ensuring Princess Charlotte's immediate safety," Harrison said, outlining the steps as he spoke. "We'll need to implement discreet security measures that prevent Prince Andrew from having unsupervised access to her without revealing the reason for these measures." "How do we accomplish that without raising suspicions?" Mitchell asked. "We'll cite general security concerns and recommend that all visits by extended family members be supervised by primary security personnel. It's not unusual to tighten protocols during periods of heightened public attention." Harrison's experience in managing delicate situations was evident in his systematic approach. The second priority is proper documentation and reporting. This information needs to reach the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Child Protection Unit, but it also needs to be reported through palace channels to the Prince of Wales and potentially to His Majesty directly. Mitchell felt his stomach tighten at the thought of that conversation. Telling a father that his brother had been abusing his daughter was beyond any training scenario he had ever encountered. "Sir, what about Princess Charlotte's request not to tell her father immediately? She's terrified that revealing this information will somehow destroy her family." Harrison considered this carefully. The child's emotional state is crucial, but we also can't delay reporting this to her parents. However, we can control how and when that conversation happens to minimize trauma to her. The chief inspector made several notes on his secure terminal before continuing. "I'm going to contact Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Webb at the Metropolitan Police. She heads their specialist unit for high-profile cases involving children. She'll need to interview Princess Charlotte, but she's experienced in handling sensitive situations involving public figures." "What about Prince Andrew? Do we take any immediate action regarding him?" "That's where this gets extremely complicated," Harrison replied grimly. "We can't simply bar him from palace grounds without cause, and we can't reveal the nature of the allegations without compromising the investigation. But we also can't allow him continued access to Princess Charlotte." Harrison stood up and moved to his wall safe, retrieving a red folder marked with the highest security classifications. "These are the protocols for handling allegations against senior royals. They've never been used, but they exist for situations exactly like this one." He opened the folder and began reading from the first page. "Step 1 requires immediate notification to the private secretary to His Majesty, the Commissioner of Metropolitan Police, and the Prince of Wales as the child's father. Step 2 involves implementing discreet protection measures for the alleged victim. Step 3 requires coordination with government officials at the Home Office level. Mitchell realized that Princess Charlotte's revelation in the garden had triggered a crisis that would involve some of the most senior officials in Britain. The ripple effects would extend far beyond the palace walls. There's something else we need to consider, Harrison continued. If these allegations are proven true, we'll need to determine if there are other potential victims. Prince Andrew has had access to numerous children over the years through various royal functions and family gatherings. The thought made Mitchell feel physically ill. The scope of potential harm could extend far beyond Princess Charlotte, involving other royal children or even children from families with connections to the royal household. Harrison closed the folder and looked directly at Mitchell. I need you to prepare a detailed written report of your conversation with Princess Charlotte. Every word, every gesture, every detail you can remember. This document will become crucial evidence in any investigation that follows. Yes, sir. When do we begin the notification process? We start now. I'll contact the private secretary's office and request an immediate meeting. You'll accompany me to provide your first-hand account. Harrison paused, his expression showing the weight of the responsibility they were about to undertake. Mitchell, once we walk out of this office and begin making these notifications, there's no stopping what comes next. Are you prepared for that? Mitchell thought about Princess Charlotte's frightened eyes and her small hand gripping his in the garden. Yes, sir. That little girl deserves protection, regardless of the consequences. Then, let's go protect her. As they left Harrison's office, Mitchell realized that his 15 years of military and security service had led to this single moment. Everything he had learned about duty, loyalty, and protection would be tested in the coming hours as they navigated the most sensitive crisis in recent royal history. The palace corridors seemed different now, filled with secrets and dangers that had been hidden beneath the polished surface of royal protocol. Princess Charlotte was somewhere in these halls, probably sitting through her afternoon lessons, unaware that her brave decision to speak up was about to change everything for her family and the institution they served. Mitchell's phone buzzed with a text message from his replacement officer, confirming that Princess Charlotte was secure in the schoolroom with her tutor and nanny. At least for the moment, she was safe. But Harrison was right. Once they set these wheels in motion, there would be no stopping the investigation that would follow. The next few hours would determine not only Princess Charlotte's future safety, but potentially the future of the British royal family itself. The private secretary's office occupied one of the most prestigious locations in Buckingham Palace, with tall windows overlooking the palace courtyard and walls lined with portraits of previous monarchs. Sir Edward Whitmore had served in this position for 8 years, managing the delicate balance between royal protocol, government relations, and public perception. He was known for his calm demeanor under pressure, but the emergency meeting request from Chief Inspector Harrison had clearly unsettled him. "Gentlemen, please sit," Sir Edward said, gesturing to the leather chairs arranged around his mahogany conference table. His usually immaculate appearance showed signs of stress, his tie slightly askew and his normally perfect hair showing evidence of anxious fingers running through it. "I understand this concerns Princess Charlotte and is classified as Category Alpha?" Harrison nodded grimly. "Sir, what we're about to discuss requires the highest level of discretion and immediate action. The information involves allegations of criminal conduct by a senior member of the royal family." Sir Edward's face went pale. In his years managing royal affairs, he had handled numerous scandals and crises, but criminal allegations against a senior royal would create unprecedented challenges for the monarchy. "Please proceed," Sir Edward said, his voice steady despite the obvious tension. Mitchell repeated his account of the conversation with Princess Charlotte, providing the same detailed recollection he had given Harrison. As he spoke, Sir Edward's expression grew increasingly grave, and by the time Mitchell finished, the private secretary was visibly shaken. "Dear God," Sir Edward whispered. "Prince Andrew and Princess Charlotte? The implications are—" He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. "Sir, we need to implement immediate protection measures for Princess Charlotte, while we determine the appropriate investigative and reporting procedures, Harrison said. We also need to notify the Prince of Wales and coordinate with the Metropolitan Police. Sir Edward stood up and moved to his secure communication console. This requires immediate notification to His Majesty. Allegations of this nature against Prince Andrew will need to be handled at the highest levels of government and the royal household. He paused, his hand hovering over the communication device. Before we proceed, I need to ask, is there any possibility that Princess Charlotte misunderstood innocent interactions? Children sometimes misinterpret adult behavior, especially in the current climate where abuse awareness is so heightened. Mitchell felt a flash of anger at the suggestion that Charlotte might have fabricated or misunderstood her experiences. Sir, with respect, Princess Charlotte described specific physical acts and manipulative behavioral patterns that an 8-year-old would not know about through normal childhood experiences. Her emotional responses, the fear, the shame, the concern about protecting her family, these are all consistent with child victims of sexual abuse. Captain Mitchell is correct, Harrison added. The details Princess Charlotte provided match established indicators that our protection officers are trained to recognize. We cannot dismiss this as childhood imagination. Sir Edward nodded slowly. Of course, you're absolutely right. The child's welfare must be our primary concern. He activated the secure line to the King's private office. I'm requesting an immediate audience with His Majesty regarding a Category Alpha situation involving Princess Charlotte. The response was immediate. The King would see them in his private study within the hour. Sir Edward then placed calls to the Prince of Wales and the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, using coded language that indicated the extreme sensitivity of the situation without revealing specific details over communication lines. The Prince of Wales is returning from his engagement in Scotland immediately, Sir Edward reported. Commissioner Davies will be here within 2 hours with Detective Chief Inspector Webb from the Specialist Child Protection Unit. As they prepared to brief the King, Mitchell found himself thinking about the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a frightened child's whispered confession in the palace gardens. Within hours, the highest levels of the British establishment would be mobilized to respond to her revelations. The King's private study was a smaller, more intimate space than the formal staterooms, filled with personal photographs and mementos from his decades of public service. His Majesty entered the room with the bearing that came from a lifetime of handling crises, but Mitchell could see concern etched in his features as he took his seat. Gentlemen, Sir Edward has indicated this involves serious allegations regarding Princess Charlotte. Please provide me with a complete picture. For the third time that day, Mitchell recounted Princess Charlotte's revelations, watching the King's expression grow increasingly grave as the full scope of the allegations became clear. The monarch's composure never wavered, but Mitchell could see the pain in his eyes as he absorbed the implications for his family. These are extremely serious accusations, the King said after Mitchell finished his account. Prince Andrew is my son, and Princess Charlotte is my beloved granddaughter. If these allegations are true, they represent not only criminal conduct, but a fundamental betrayal of family trust. Sir Edward leaned forward. Your Majesty, we need to consider the broader implications. If this becomes public, the damage to the institution could be severe. However, our primary obligation is to protect Princess Charlotte and ensure that justice is served. The King nodded firmly. The child's welfare is paramount. Whatever damage may come to the family or the institution is secondary to ensuring her safety and seeing that appropriate action is taken if these allegations are substantiated. What are your instructions regarding Prince Andrew, Your Majesty? Harrison asked. The King considered this carefully. He cannot have unsupervised access to Princess Charlotte or any other children until this matter is thoroughly investigated. However, we must handle this discreetly to avoid compromising the investigation or causing additional trauma to Charlotte. Mitchell felt relief that the King's primary concern was for his granddaughter's safety rather than protecting the family's reputation. It reinforced his faith in the institution he had sworn to serve. I'll speak with the Prince of Wales when he arrives, the king continued. This conversation will be one of the most difficult of my life, but William needs to know what has allegedly happened to his daughter. The door opened, and a private secretary entered quietly. Your Majesty, the Prince of Wales has arrived and is requesting an immediate meeting. Mitchell watched the king's face as he prepared for what might be the most challenging conversation between a father and son in the history of the royal family. The knowledge that he would have to tell Prince William that his brother had allegedly abused his daughter was clearly weighing heavily on the monarch. "Send him in," the king said quietly. Prince William entered the study with obvious concern, still wearing the formal attire from his interrupted engagement in Scotland. His face showed the strain of the hasty journey and the worry that had been building since receiving the urgent summons. "Father, what's happened? I was told there was a Category Alpha situation involving Charlotte." The king gestured for his son to sit. "William, what I'm about to tell you is extremely difficult. It concerns allegations that Andrew has been inappropriately touching Charlotte during visits when you and Catherine are away." The color drained from Prince William's face as the words sank in. Mitchell watched the future king process this information, seeing anger, disbelief, and protective fury cycle through his expressions. "What exactly are you telling me?" Prince William's voice was tight with controlled emotion. Mitchell was asked to repeat Princess Charlotte's account once more, and with each detail, Prince William's face grew darker. By the time the recounting was complete, the prince was gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. "That bastard," Prince William said quietly, his royal composure cracking for just a moment. "My little girl, how long has this been going on?" Based on Princess Charlotte's account, it appears to have started several months ago, Harrison replied. She was terrified to tell anyone because Prince Andrew convinced her that speaking up would cause problems for your family. Prince William stood abruptly and began pacing, his protective instincts as a father warring with his training as a future king. "I want Andrew arrested immediately. I want him kept away from my children and any other children. And I want to see Charlotte right now." "William," the king said gently, "we need to handle this carefully. Charlotte is frightened and confused. The way we approach her now will affect her emotional recovery and any potential investigation." "She's my daughter," Prince William replied firmly. "She told a security officer before she told her own father. That tells me how scared she was and how much we've failed to protect her." Sir Edward cleared his throat. "Your Royal Highness, Detective Chief Inspector Webb will be here shortly to begin the formal investigation. She's experienced in interviewing child victims and will know how to handle Princess Charlotte's testimony without causing additional trauma." Prince William stopped pacing and looked directly at Mitchell. "Captain, you were the one Charlotte trusted with this information. I want you personally responsible for her security until this matter is resolved. I don't care what protocols need to be adjusted." "Yes, Your Royal Highness," Mitchell replied immediately. The assignment was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. "What about Andrew?" Prince William asked, turning back to his father. "What's to prevent him from simply denying everything and continuing to have access to children?" The king's expression hardened. "Andrew will be summoned for a meeting this evening. He will be confronted with these allegations, and his response will help determine our next steps. If he admits to the conduct, he will face immediate consequences. If he denies it, the police investigation will proceed. And if he tries to flee or interfere with the investigation," Prince William asked, "his passport will be confiscated and he will be placed under discreet surveillance," Harrison replied. "We've coordinated with the Metropolitan Police to ensure he cannot leave the country or contact potential witnesses." As the meeting continued, Mitchell realized that Princess Charlotte's brave decision to speak up had set in motion the most serious internal crisis the royal family had faced in living memory. The next few hours would determine not only her future safety, but the integrity of the investigation and potentially the future of Prince Andrew's position within the royal family. The protective father and future king sitting across from him would ensure that justice was pursued, regardless of the personal and institutional costs. Princess Charlotte had found her voice, and now the full power of the crown was mobilizing to protect her. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Webb had spent 20 years working with child victims of sexual abuse, but walking through the gates of Buckingham Palace to interview Princess Charlotte presented challenges unlike any case in her career. The ornate surroundings and formal protocol couldn't mask the fundamental reality that an 8-year-old child was at the center of a criminal investigation involving one of the most prominent families in the world. Webb was accompanied by Detective Sergeant Emma Thompson, a specialist in forensic interviewing of children, and Dr. Patricia Harrison, a child psychologist who would help assess Princess Charlotte's emotional state and ensure the interview process didn't cause additional trauma. The team had been briefed on the sensitive nature of the case, but the full implications were still settling in as they were escorted through the palace corridors. Remember, this is a criminal investigation first and a royal matter second, Webb reminded her team as they were led to the specially prepared interview room. Princess Charlotte is our primary concern, and we follow standard protocols regardless of the setting. The interview room had been carefully arranged to be as non-threatening as possible. Child-sized furniture, soft lighting, and some of Princess Charlotte's own toys created an environment designed to help her feel comfortable and safe. Mitchell stood outside the room, having been assigned as her personal protection officer, as requested by Prince William. Princess Charlotte entered the room holding her nanny's hand, her small face showing the strain of the past 24 hours. She had been told that some nice police officers wanted to talk to her about the conversation she had with Captain Mitchell, but the formal nature of the situation was clearly overwhelming for an 8-year-old. "Hello, Charlotte," Detective Chief Inspector Webb said warmly, using the child's first name to create a more personal connection. "I'm Sarah, and this is Emma and Patricia. We're here because Captain Mitchell told us you were very brave and shared something important with him yesterday." Charlotte nodded silently, her eyes darting between the adults in the room. She moved to where her favorite stuffed horse was sitting on the small table and hugged it to her chest. "Can you tell me about Captain Mitchell?" Webb asked gently, following established protocols for building rapport with child witnesses. "He keeps me safe when I play in the gardens," Charlotte replied quietly. "He's nice, and he listens to me. That's wonderful. And when you talked to Captain Mitchell yesterday, you told him something that was bothering you. Can you tell us about that?" Dr. Harrison watched Charlotte's body language carefully as the child began to recount her experiences with Prince Andrew. The psychologist noted the physical indicators of trauma, the way Charlotte hunched her shoulders when discussing the inappropriate touching, how she avoided eye contact when describing the most serious incidents, and the way her voice became even smaller when explaining Prince Andrew's threats about what would happen if she told anyone. Detective Sergeant Thompson took detailed notes while Webb conducted the interview, documenting not just Charlotte's words, but her emotional responses and physical reactions. The account was consistent with what Mitchell had reported, but hearing it directly from the child provided additional details that would be crucial for the investigation. "Charlotte, when Uncle Andrew touched you in ways that felt wrong, can you show us on this doll where that happened?" Webb asked, producing an anatomically correct doll that was standard equipment for child abuse investigations. Charlotte's hands trembled as she demonstrated on the doll, clearly reliving traumatic experiences as she showed the locations where Prince Andrew had inappropriately touched her. Dr. Harrison intervened when the child became too distressed, suggesting breaks and providing comfort to help her continue. "You're being very brave, Charlotte," Webb said after the child had completed her demonstration. "One more important question. Has Uncle Andrew ever told you not to tell anyone about these special times?" "Yes," Charlotte replied, her voice barely audible. "He said if I told Papa or Mama, terrible things would happen to our whole family. He said people would say it was my fault and that Papa might not be allowed to be a prince anymore." This revelation was particularly significant because it demonstrated the manipulative tactics commonly used by adult abusers to maintain control over child victims. The fear of causing harm to her family had kept Charlotte silent for months, allowing the abuse to continue. After 2 hours of careful questioning, Dr. Harrison recommended ending the interview session. Charlotte had provided detailed testimony that corroborated the initial account she had given Mitchell, and continuing would risk overwhelming the child emotionally. "Charlotte, you've been incredibly brave today," Webb told the little girl as the interview concluded. "Everything you've told us helps us understand what happened, and we're going to make sure you're safe." As Charlotte was returned to her nanny's care, the investigation team met with Mitchell and Chief Inspector Harrison to compare the formal interview results with the initial report from the garden conversation. "The accounts are completely consistent," Thompson reported. "Princess Charlotte's testimony shows clear indicators of genuine traumatic experience. Her emotional responses, physical demonstrations, and specific details all support the allegations of sexual abuse." Dr. Harrison provided her preliminary psychological assessment. "Charlotte is exhibiting classic symptoms of childhood sexual abuse trauma: fear of disclosure, guilt and shame, confusion about appropriate boundaries, and anxiety about family consequences. Her testimony has the ring of authenticity that we see in genuine victims." Webb nodded grimly. "Based on this interview and the supporting evidence, we have sufficient grounds to formally charge Prince Andrew with multiple counts of child sexual abuse. However, given the extraordinary circumstances, we need to coordinate our actions with palace security and government officials." Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Prince Andrew had arrived for what he believed was a routine family meeting. He had been told only that there were some security concerns that needed to be discussed, not that he was about to face accusations that would destroy his life and potentially bring down the monarchy. Sir Edward Whitmore and Chief Inspector Harrison met Prince Andrew in a formal reception room, with Mitchell and 2 other security officers positioned discreetly nearby. The prince appeared relaxed and slightly annoyed at having his evening interrupted for what he assumed was another mundane protocol discussion. "Andrew, thank you for coming so promptly," Sir Edward began formally. "We need to discuss some very serious allegations that have been made regarding your interactions with Princess Charlotte." Prince Andrew's expression immediately shifted from casual annoyance to sharp attention. "Allegations? What kind of allegations?" Harrison stepped forward, his years of experience in handling difficult interrogations evident in his controlled demeanor. "Princess Charlotte has reported that during your visits when the Prince and Princess of Wales are away, you have engaged in inappropriate sexual contact with her." The color drained from Prince Andrew's face, but his response came quickly. "That's absolutely ridiculous. Charlotte is my niece, and I would never. This is preposterous. Who put such ideas in that child's head?" Princess Charlotte provided detailed accounts of multiple incidents. Sir Edward continued steadily. "She has been interviewed by specialist police officers, and her testimony is being treated as credible evidence in a criminal investigation." Prince Andrew stood abruptly, his composure beginning to crack. "This is a setup. Someone is using that little girl to attack me. Charlotte wouldn't make up something like this on her own." Mitchell watched the prince's reactions carefully. His denials followed predictable patterns that were common among accused abusers: immediate rejection of the allegations, suggestions that the child had been coached or manipulated by others, and attempts to deflect responsibility. "Your Royal Highness," Harrison said formally, "Detective Chief Inspector Webb from the Metropolitan Police will need to interview you as part of this investigation. I must also inform you that your passport will be held pending the completion of the investigation, and you will be asked not to have contact with any children, including members of the royal family, until this matter is resolved." "You can't be serious," Prince Andrew replied, his voice rising. "I'm a member of the royal family. You can't treat me like a common criminal based on the fantasies of an 8-year-old child. We're treating this as we would any allegation of child sexual abuse," Sir Edward replied firmly. "The fact that you're a member of the royal family doesn't exempt you from investigation when credible allegations are made." Prince Andrew began pacing the room, clearly struggling to process the magnitude of the situation he was facing. "I want to speak to Charlotte myself. I want to ask her directly about these supposed incidents. There's obviously been some terrible misunderstanding. "That will not be permitted under any circumstances," Harrison replied immediately. "Contact with the alleged victim would constitute witness intimidation and would result in your immediate arrest." The reality of his situation was beginning to penetrate Prince Andrew's initial shock and denial. "I need to speak with my legal counsel immediately, and I want to talk to my brother about this madness. His Majesty is aware of the allegations and the investigation," Sir Edward replied. "Your legal representation is certainly your right, but I must advise you that any statements you make may be used as evidence in criminal proceedings." As the confrontation continued, Mitchell realized that Prince Andrew's responses were following the classic pattern of an accused abuser facing exposure. The denials, the attempts to discredit the victim, the claims of conspiracy, it was all textbook behavior that made Princess Charlotte's allegations more credible rather than less. The investigation was now officially underway, with formal statements from the victim, witness testimony from Mitchell, and the beginning of what would become one of the most explosive criminal cases in British royal history. Princess Charlotte's whispered confession in the palace garden had set in motion events that would test every institution designed to protect both children and the monarchy itself. The next phase would determine whether justice could prevail even when it threatened the very foundations of one of the world's oldest and most revered institutions. 3 weeks after Princess Charlotte's revelation in the palace gardens, the investigation had evolved into one of the most closely guarded secrets in British law enforcement. Detective Chief Inspector Webb's team had assembled a comprehensive case file that included Charlotte's detailed testimony, corroborating evidence from palace security records, and expert psychological evaluations that supported the child's credibility. Mitchell maintained his position as Princess Charlotte's personal protection officer, watching her slowly begin to emerge from the fear that had dominated her young life. The child was receiving counseling from Dr. Harrison and had started to smile more naturally, though the healing process would take much longer than the investigation itself. The breakthrough came when Detective Sergeant Thompson discovered that Prince Andrew's electronic devices contained evidence that corroborated Princess Charlotte's timeline of events. His calendar showed visits to Kensington Palace that aligned precisely with the dates Charlotte had mentioned, and deleted photographs recovered from his phone showed inappropriate images of the child that had been taken during their special time sessions. This evidence transforms the case from allegations to proof. Webb reported to the Joint Task Force that now included senior officials from the Crown Prosecution Service, the Metropolitan Police, and Palace Administration. Combined with Princess Charlotte's testimony, we have grounds for multiple charges including sexual assault of a minor and creation of indecent images of a child. The decision to arrest Prince Andrew required coordination at the highest levels of government. The Home Secretary, the Attorney General, and the Prime Minister were all briefed on the evidence, while the King was kept informed of every development in the investigation his granddaughter's courage had initiated. The arrest took place at Prince Andrew's residence on a quiet Tuesday morning. Webb personally led the operation, accompanied by officers who had been briefed on the unique protocols required when arresting a member of the royal family. The prince's solicitor was present, but the evidence was overwhelming enough that even his legal team advised him that denial was no longer a viable strategy. "Prince Andrew," Webb said formally as she placed him under arrest, "you are charged with multiple counts of sexual assault against a minor, creation of indecent images of a child, and intimidation of a witness. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court." The formal charges marked the culmination of Princess Charlotte's brave decision to trust Captain Mitchell with her terrible secret. The little girl who had been too frightened to tell her own parents about her abuse had ultimately brought down one of the most powerful men in the British establishment. Back at Buckingham Palace, Mitchell was asked to attend a private meeting with the King and Prince William. The small study where they met was the same room where the crisis had first been reported, but the atmosphere was entirely different now that justice was finally being served. "Captain Mitchell," the King began, "Princess Charlotte's willingness to confide in you began a chain of events that has been extraordinarily difficult for our family, but absolutely necessary to protect her and potentially other children. Your handling of her disclosure and the subsequent investigation has been exemplary." Prince William nodded in agreement. "My daughter trusted you with the most important information of her young life. That trust may have saved her from years of continued abuse and potentially saved other children from becoming victims." Mitchell felt the weight of the past 3 weeks as he reflected on how a routine afternoon in the palace gardens had led to this moment. "Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, I was simply doing my duty to protect Princess Charlotte." She showed incredible courage in speaking up, despite her fear about the consequences. "The consequences have indeed been severe," the king acknowledged. "Prince Andrew will face criminal prosecution and has been stripped of all royal titles and patronages. The damage to the monarchy's reputation will take years to repair. But Charlotte is safe, and justice is being served. Those are the priorities that matter most." Prince William leaned forward in his chair. "Captain Mitchell, Charlotte has asked to see you. She wants to thank you personally for believing her and keeping your promise to protect her. Would you be willing to meet with her?" The request was both an honor and an emotional challenge. Mitchell had watched Princess Charlotte begin her recovery over the past weeks, but he knew that seeing her would bring back memories of that terrifying afternoon when she had whispered her secrets in the garden. "Of course, Your Royal Highness. It will be my privilege." They found Princess Charlotte in the same palace garden where she had first revealed her abuse. She was playing with her toy horses again, but her movements were more relaxed, and her laughter seemed genuine rather than forced. When she saw Mitchell approaching, she ran to him with a smile that showed her natural personality was beginning to emerge from the shadow of trauma. "Captain Mitchell," she called out, throwing her arms around his waist in a spontaneous hug. "Papa told me that Uncle Andrew can't hurt me anymore because I was brave enough to tell you what happened." Mitchell knelt down to her level, just as he had 3 weeks earlier when she had approached him with her terrible secret. "You were incredibly brave, Princess Charlotte. You did exactly the right thing by telling someone you trusted. I was so scared that everyone would be angry with me," Charlotte said quietly. "But Papa and Mama said I was very brave and that grown-ups who hurt children are the ones who get in trouble, not the children who tell the truth." "That's exactly right," Mitchell replied. "And you'll never have to worry about Uncle Andrew again. He can't come visit anymore, and there are lots of people whose job it is to keep you safe." Charlotte picked up one of her toy horses and held it carefully. "Dr. Patricia says that talking about scary things helps them stop being so scary. She says I can talk to her anytime I feel worried or sad about what happened." The child's resilience was remarkable, though Mitchell knew her recovery would continue for years to come. The trauma of sexual abuse leaves lasting impacts, but Princess Charlotte was surrounded by professionals who understood how to help children heal from such experiences. "Captain Mitchell," Charlotte said, looking up at him with the directness that had made her revelation so credible, "will you still be my protection officer? I feel safe when you're nearby. As long as your papa wants me to keep you safe, I'll be here," Mitchell replied. "That's a promise." As weeks turned to months, the criminal case against Prince Andrew proceeded through the courts. His legal team initially attempted to claim diplomatic immunity and royal privilege, but the evidence was too overwhelming and the government's commitment to justice too strong for such defenses to succeed. Princess Charlotte testified via video link in a child-friendly setting, sparing her the trauma of appearing in a formal courtroom. Her testimony was clear, consistent, and devastating in its impact on the jury. The physical evidence recovered from Prince Andrew's devices corroborated every detail of her account, making his guilt undeniable. The verdict was guilty on all counts. Prince Andrew was sentenced to 12 years in prison, a term that reflected both the severity of his crimes and the betrayal of trust involved in abusing a child who was dependent on him for care and protection. The sentencing marked the end of the criminal justice process, but the beginning of a longer journey of healing for Princess Charlotte and accountability for the royal family. The monarchy implemented new safeguarding procedures, including mandatory background checks for all staff and family members who worked with children, and established an independent oversight committee to monitor child protection within royal households. Mitchell continued as Princess Charlotte's protection officer and watched her grow into a confident, happy child whose traumatic experience had been transformed into a source of strength rather than shame. She began speaking to other children about the importance of telling trusted adults when someone made them uncomfortable, turning her victimization into advocacy that would help protect other children. 2 years after that afternoon in the palace garden, Princess Charlotte approached Mitchell during one of their regular walks around the grounds. She was now 10 years old, taller and more mature, but still possessed the directness that had made her disclosure so powerful. "Captain Mitchell," she said, "I've been thinking about that day when I told you about Uncle Andrew. I was so scared, but telling you was the best thing I ever did." "Why do you think that, Princess?" Mitchell asked, knowing that her perspective on the experience would continue to evolve as she grew older. "Because keeping scary secrets makes them more powerful," Charlotte replied with wisdom that seemed beyond her years. "When I told you the truth, the scary secrets stopped having power over me. Uncle Andrew couldn't scare me anymore because I had people who believed me and protected me." Mitchell felt profound pride in the young girl who had shown such courage in the face of abuse and manipulation. Her willingness to trust him with her truth had not only saved her from continued victimization, but had demonstrated that even the most powerful perpetrators could be held accountable when brave victims found their voice. "You taught me something important too, Princess," Mitchell replied. "You showed me that sometimes the most important part of protecting someone isn't stopping the bad things from happening, but believing them when they tell you that something bad has already happened." Princess Charlotte smiled and picked up her favorite toy horse, the same one she had been clutching during their first conversation about Uncle Andrew. "I think I'll always remember that day in the garden, but now it's a good memory because it's the day everything started getting better." As they continued their walk through the peaceful palace grounds, Mitchell reflected on how Princess Charlotte's courage had transformed not only her own life, but had strengthened the institution they served. Her willingness to speak truth to power had proven that justice could prevail even in the most rarefied circumstances, and that protecting children would always be more important than protecting reputations. The little girl who had once whispered her fears in the garden had found her voice, and in doing so, had ensured that other children would be heard and believed when they needed protection most. Captain James Mitchell had served the crown faithfully for many years, but no duty in his career had been more important than listening to Princess Charlotte on that afternoon when her blood ran cold with fear, and she finally found the courage to reveal who had hurt her.